Maraming salamat po sa mga actors natin. Thank you, Dr. Berset, Dr. Mineral, and Dr. Mansina. I would like to invite Dr. Pilot Jordan to moderate our open forum.
Thank you, Dr. Chel. So, as we have very little time left, we would have to ask my colleagues here how many questions we may be able to accommodate. But in the meantime, some pieces of paper are going to be circulated, and we would appreciate that you write your questions, and writing your names is voluntary, so that let's see, maybe we can read from here your questions from the floor. Okay, I see a hand over there. Please identify yourself, and then kindly limit your question to 1 or 2 minutes. And tell us who you want to address your question. Yes, sir.
Magandang hapon po. Ako si Juan Padilla. Ako ay pinalad na maging member ng Technical Working Group ng both houses ng Senate at ng House of Representatives. Ang pagkakamera, yung ginagawa yung batas ng DREAMS. Anyway po, after that, nasa practice na po ako. Ngayon po ay tumutulong po ako sa ilang NGOs at LGUs para i-integrate yung social economic resiliency with DRNC through organics and natural and sustainable agriculture. Anyway po, comment lang po. Pwede po smorgasbord ko na para isahan na lang. Hindi na ako babalik-balik. Tapos po, siguro sa lahat din po ng question.
Okay, so can we limit it to 3 or to 5?
Good.
Is that okay? So we can ask that.
Okay po, yung ang isa lang po napansin ko ay bakit po natin kailangan po? Bakit po normalcy yung in-improvise natin? Kasi sa amin ng panahon ng ginagawa namin at ngayon, ang panangagat po namin is building back better. Not building back. Hindi po. Hindi pagbabalik sa dati, kundi pagbabalik sa mas magandang kalagayan. Kaya medyo yun po yung comment ko dun sa pinaka-puntos ng discussion. And then, of course, we have challenges in the law. I was also asked to assist in the sunset review, pero inaayos pa po namin yung terms of reference. Anyway, yun yung pinaka-major point ko. Bakit normalcy yung ating pinubuo? Why not? Better time. Sumasakayin po ako sa binanggit ni Chris, ni Sir. I'm sorry, I will speak both in English and Filipino at kay Mr. Val. This is more of a function of preparedness. But preparedness does not mean you prepare for the hazard and the risk. You prepare for the disaster. Ang punto po namin lagi, yung ginagawa po namin at experience po namin yan, you prepare before the risk the hazard becomes a risk and the risk becomes a disaster. Yun po yung cycle na dapat pinag-prepare. Kasi from the looks of it, ang pinag-prepare natin ay paano magre-respond immediately. So third po, tipong maganda po yun. Maganda po yung mga nabanggit na initiatives at pagsagot sa challenges sa level ng LGUs as stakeholders. But naku po, I was po in Eastern Visayas in summer last June for a 2-week rapid assessment for a national organization, for a national official. Nakita po namin na it seems the major stakeholders, which are na yung mga tinamaan mismo, yung mga community, organizations, etc., were left to be treated as only as a beneficiaries. While in fact, ang governance, hindi lang po yung usapin niya ng LGU. Ang governance po is the full participation po ng mga community stakeholders. Kaya sinasabi nga natin, Ang panawagan din po natin, don't treat those beneficiaries, quote-unquote po, kundi as active participants in the disaster as well as the building back better na initiative. So ito po yung aking comment. Hindi ko po nakita to sa mga present. Although nakita ko po in some instances dun sa mga functions. Yun po.
Thank you very much.
Baka po pwede.
Okay, so those were comments and do not necessarily need answers unless many of the reactors or even our resource person wants to respond. If there are any comments, or shall I take other comments? Yeah.
I think those are very valid observations, sir. So I agree with you when you said that probably we shouldn't look at normalcy as something to be improvised. However, if you have vigilantly monitored the Third World Study Center Public Lecture Series, there is a pattern in the selection of themes. Like, for instance, the first public lecture series would have something to do with communication risk, risky miscommunication. So that's the pattern. So it's more of to attract the listeners or participants of this public lecture series. And as regards the comment that you mentioned, it's really good that we gather. There is also another good side of gathering this improvisations or practices, and that would be once we have learned about them, they are no longer improvisations. They actually build a knowledge, and that is how we move forward and make it better. That's just
okay. Any more?
Yeah, I agree. It is better to build better than building back better. So I heard that from Joey Salceda. Sabi na, when they have to rebuild Tacloban in the same place, you're also exposing them to the same hazard. Why not build new Tacloban? The problem is it is easier than that. Like us in Marikina, we know that Malagay, Tumaha, and everybody is this platform siya. Lagi siyang binaba. It's better to relocate them, but it's easier said than that. We don't have other spaces or land available to relocate all these people. We just have to make them resilient to adapt to the situation. So I also agree that when you make plans, you have to include the community in doing plans, not prescribe a solution that they are not included in the decision making. For example, as Joey Salceda said that if you want to relocate them to a place where they could have livelihood only 5 to 10 minutes away from their usual jobs, so you could easily involve them in the construction process, make them decide what kind of house they want to, not prescribing a common house or like take a home situation for them.
Okay, thank you. Let me read one question here, and I'm going to take 2 more from the gentleman in front and that lady, and then I shall take the questions by batches. But before that, I see Dr.
No, there's people on this side also that have raised their hand a long time. Okay,
so this is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and after that, we will hear from the reactors so that we can get more from the floor. Okay, let me read this first. For Marikina, this is from Landi, Mr. Landicho from NAPSI. This is for Marikina, the RRM officer. How do you do the post-disaster assessment? How soon do you do it? How do you conduct it? With whom? How is it integrated into the local DRR plan?
Good afternoon, I'm Claudio Carinas. I'm involved also on DRRM as a project. I was hoping to find discussion for this afternoon on 2 things. And gladly, one important topic came out, the professionalization of the practice, which I think we sorely lack in these parts. So I think it's, I think I asked that before from the dean of the college, what can the university do to lead in the professionalization of the practice. In fact, informally, I've talked to some members of the Civil Service Advisory Board. They're just waiting for proposal on the professionalization, institutionalization of DRM position, like municipal disaster officer. I think there are welcoming proposals on that. And I was really looking for discussion on accountability as an extension of governance or an essential part of governance and public policy. It's kind of tiring talking about all the failures of Yolanda and with all those lives lost, 6,000 according to your official statistics, and we've sent no one to jail. We haven't made one LG official resign or vacate from his post for not doing what he's supposed to be doing. I think I'm looking on that direction. So if you can please explore those two important takeaways for me for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. The lady here again and one.
Good afternoon. I am Tessa University from the Center for Disaster Preparedness. We're an NGO who is advocating for a community-based DRRM. So I'm glad to hear two of my former professors speak in front today. And I have two comments and three questions. So first, two comments to address Sir's inquiry and also Sir Verse's concern on how the academy can actually improve the professionalization of DRR. Actually, there's already, in the law, there's the OCT or the NQC is mandated to establish the National DRRM Training Institute. And actually, just a few weeks ago, there's already a finalization of how this will be implemented. And I would like to suggest to actually, I think the NCPAG was already tapped to be part of the service providers. So I hope the academy, aside from participating as a service provider for this training institute, I hope UP can also institutionalize a course, either an undergraduate course or a postgraduate course on DRR, because we badly need DRR courses in the Philippines. So I think there's already one in Bicol University. So I hope UP can also host one. So that's number one. Number two, it was already mentioned a while ago, the role of the communities. Because if we really involve the communities in our DRRM planning, some of the problems that Ma'am Fraga raised a while ago can be addressed, especially the cooperation of the communities when it comes to evacuation and the rehabilitation phase. So those are two of my comments. And now my three questions, two of my questions are actually addressed to Prof. Fraga. So the first one was, how was the LDRMF utilized prior to Yolanda? So were there any LDRRM plans institutionalized, or there were none at all? So that's number one. Number two, we also raised that QRF should be made more accessible. So what are the ways can we actually make it more accessible? Because as Prof. Verse said, we are already on the sunset review of RA 10121, and we want to have these inputs on how we can make it more accessible to reflect on the policy. And last, for Prof. Verse, what can you say, sir, about the accountability measures as mentioned by the previous asker? Ano po yung pwede natin ma-instill pang accountability measures, especially in the improvisations na ginawa ng mga LGUs at probably gagawin pa. Ayun, maraming salamat.
Okay, I'm going to at this point again remind those who are going to ask questions to limit their questions to maybe at the most 2 questions. If some questions have already been asked, natin yun. Now I shall take the last one for the cash. I hope also the reactors also remember.
May name is Niklas Ries. I'm a consultant for the German Ministry for Development Cooperation. My question is actually on the leader focus the presentation had. It was all revolving around these two chief executives. I also heard from Dr. Burse. He said, we seem to have forgotten crisis leadership. And I had the impression that all the other stakeholders, business is not cooperating, the common cow seem to be stubborn. I'm exaggerating now just to make a point. Or NGOs and national offices, agencies were actually not mentioned. All my first question is that your experience there, that you have the feeling everything stands and falls with these leaders? And my second question would be, if it's like that, what happens actually to LGUs which have leaders who like public service? You know? And we just heard that that seems to be quite normal as well.
Now let's start the ball rolling by answering all those questions. If you can recall, I will have to remind.
Thank you very much for all those comments and questions. Now, I just needed to get the microphone before I forget some of these comments. First, because this has been a repeating comment regarding governance and community empowerment, etc., we have to take note of the fact that I stated at the beginning of my presentation that the focus would be on disaster response immediately after the typhoon, which technically would place the responders on their own. So they were alone. The NGOs, the people, the communities that you said should help them, the stakeholders, they were not yet there. So the focus definitely would be on the local chief officials, mayor and vice mayor. But definitely there was also participation coming from the communities. I did mention Community Watch. I did mention that the mayor of Liga was more for community empowerment. However, we have to take note of the fact of the vertical network, which is not exactly governance in Colón. So, when we talk about, I beg your pardon, sir.
I was in Banalica for 2 weeks.
After,
June.
I was there in April, and
no substantial change. Aside from the infrastructure of the municipality.
I see. Okay, so as regards the infrastructures, definitely, so there a lot of work. When we went there was also a lot of work involved. But I'm just addressing the comments regarding the presence of community empowerment, which was present as regards follow-up when we talk about Community Watch and community empowerment right after the incident. However, when we talk about the LG plans, meron, yes, meron. However, these are also more or less copied versions of the suggested and imposed plans coming from the national government. And that is also a topic that is part of our larger study, but unfortunately I did not cover here because the theme is on improvisation. How to make funds accessible. We're talking about, I agree, the law is proactive. It's supposed to support mitigation and preparation activities. In fact, improvisations are supposed to be incorporated under coping strategies, anticipating unforeseeable events. Unlike events, is part of contingency planning. But how do you plan for, as I said, yung unimaginable distraction and devastation? But now that we have experience and we knew how a Yolanda could affect not just the people, but the entire municipality, etc. Then this should make us more aware. And I still believe in the significance of doing empirical studies. Now, stories may seem like stories, tiring, unfortunately, who would want to go back to that? No, but we need to reflect on this. As social scientists, not just public administrations, we need to repeat and constantly repeat these stories so that we will remember and learn from them. Yun lang. And also, as regards the question of focus, focus, I've already addressed. The funds, I said, I think I already covered that. The question of focus on the leader. I answered that first. So when we talk about the responders, the first responders, the local government officials, they were they were on their own from day 0 to day 1. However, when we talk about stakeholders, yes. So remember, unfortunately, in municipalities where you have multitasking, when I say multitasking, overlapping functions, political and business, plans and networks, that to some, for political scientists, we look at it as a vertical linkage. So it's quite traditional. But the network of stakeholders happen to fall within the context of patronage. So the stakeholders were there, but not without reciprocity. So they were expecting something out of us to be offered. The role of the academe, I was going to suggest, but I don't know if it's already here in NCPAG. NCPAG, if you can, for instance, offer another field, another specialization on emergency management or crisis management, another field. For special courses, then fully. But that's really good because it will never, it's not just because we are all experiencing all of these disasters now, but I think it's about time to institutionalize even that specialization, not just as an institute. So that's this one.
I'm going to ask Dr. Verse to respond to
so yeah, I'll just continue on with the issue of the role of the academia. As mentioned by Dean, in NCPAG, we have already started offering, well, at least last year, started last sem, or before PAM, we had special courses on disasters. And in fact, even outside of those special courses, in many of in other courses like public policy, local governance, we try to encourage as much as possible the utilization of the focus on the RM issues, climate change issues. In my current class right now, my public policy classes, the students are forced to do research on climate change, disaster risk management issues. So their policy papers are from that. So much for academic freedom. But basically, so we try to, because we see it as a critical component of education. At the broader scale, the issue about training institute. Yeah, we know that RA 10121 actually explicitly provides for the creation of a training institute. However, since 2010, that has been one of the areas that we have not really, fully implemented. We have, of course, the Bicol University. They have a Climate Change Academy there as a de facto training institute for climate change. But I understand now that OCD would like to make it institutionalized. In the case of, but beyond that, because we know, for instance, the problem really is not at the national level. The problem is much bigger at the local level. And we cannot expect all of these local executives, local planners, local practitioners to all converge into Papaginal to get the training that they need. So we are also thinking, the UP system is exploring also in CHED, with the possibility of creating regional training hubs, centers for technical assistance that could provide, it could serve as core area, core or research hubs, basically, or training hubs, to support different the LGUs localities in a contiguous area. So that's currently being explored with Shell. When it comes to accountability, it's a very important issue in my opinion. And in fact, internationally, that's one also of being considered now. One thing has been considered as we're discussing the success with the HFA, the Human Framework for Action. In previous experiences in Italy, we probably have heard, but accountability, we were talking also of not just accountability of local officials, but also the accountability of scientists, for instance. Because if you remember Yolanda, it's one of the ammunitions of many local officials when it comes to their failure to effectively respond. So, for example, in Italy, going back to the example, the group of citizens actually filed a case against scientists for supposedly failing to give them the right and correct information in the aftermath of an earthquake sometime in 2000. So I think there's also the issue of, in Japan, of course, the mayor, the killer earthquake. And then, of course, the mayor also, in Japan, a mayor was also sued by the survivors of the families of survivors, of those who perished from the earthquake, from the Tri disaster. Precisely because they felt that the mayor was somehow led to the decision of the mayor led to the death of the municipal employees. So, and in the case of Sendong, the city mayor was actually super good citizens. But then again, I'd like to mention also about the accountability because if you might remember, we had a meeting last week with USEC and one of the discussion points is the accountability being, having also an effect, a negative effect on innovations, or in this case, improvisations, because it puts them stifle, for instance, let's say, on real-time decisions. So even in the recovery stage, Jose where one of the directors said, for instance, that right now some of the LGUs are quite hesitant to do drastic or quick actions, precisely because of the fear that they'll just end up in prison. Because there's also, we don't have that much guidance. Mahina pa yung recovery yung planning natin. So there's not much guidance on how we can move forward. And in the light of that, in the absence of that specific guidelines, there's always at the back of your mind, there's always forward, looking at how you manage all these things. So there's a balance, making sure that when we think of accountability, we're not thinking along punitive lines, maybe. Maybe we should get a look at, for instance, providing more incentives and strength instead of prohibiting certain actions.
Maybe I can contribute it. He's a practitioner, so.
So with regard to rapid damage assessment, so we're required to report it. OCD, they have given us time to report every 4 hours. Imagine. During that, we have to contact them every 4 hours. Once the starting disaster meeting, active group namin, we are required to email them at 5 o'clock and then 8 o'clock in the morning the following day. So that's how rapid we have to give assessment. I agree that there must be accountability of the LGU executives. He must be present at the command center during times of typhoon or disaster situation. To which in our city he is doing well. He is always present at the command center whenever typhoon is present at Marikina. It would be better if the DRM planning would start bottom-up procedure, not national and actually, what's happening, so we made the DRM plan for the city and then we are asked to help the barangay to do their own plans. So it should be better that we started at the barangay, the community level, and then bottoms up. And then then we have to revise again our plan at the city level. We don't have problem with the release of the quick emergency fund, so it's readily available. We have connections with the gasoline shop, source of gasoline. We have made relationship with the source of our immediately cooked food for the evacuation centers. So we have established that, given that we are in the morning. So we have told them that they should be ready to deliver these foods only with one call. We really welcome the academy to help us in our planning sessions. We had to, they had to help us to be more better assessment of the situation. Actually, Dr. Mahamona has responded with us with our hydromet situation. So we subscribe to the NORWAC website before the typhoon comes into the area of preliminary responsibility. We are aware of it already. They send us advices, and every hour they are constantly monitoring us. It's really a welcome for the academy to be included in our DRM plan.
I think most of it has been said by the previous speakers, but I want to go back to this notion of building back better or building back safer. There is worldwide experience that demonstrated that displacing people from the location where they used to be generally fails. People settle in specific locations because of, there are conditions for living, for livelihoods, there's water, there's access, that's why they settle where they settle. And in addition to the fact that most times we don't have alternatives. But just naturally there is this reaction, like it was after Yolanda, that there is this no construction zone that are set up. And then very quickly officials realized, oh, that's not workable. Then we define safer zones or safest zones and things like this. But from my experience working in this field for 30 years, it's a constant thing that comes back in every single major disaster. And many countries, many cities have tried this, both with respect to quake and with respect to floods. And people come back. They come back to where they used to live. So we have to realize there is a reality that, and work with these communities and with nature to figure out a way to survive. I think that's a comment I wanted to add. Thank you.
This question is for Ms. Dr. Personal. I'm Christine Alvarez from the Sociology Graduate Program. So first question is compliance to evacuate exacted only from slum dwellers, or is it also required of residents of more affluent neighborhoods like Provident Village, which, as you've seen during Ondoy, is just as vulnerable as slum settlements, which are always singled out? And then second question, if I understood you correctly, you mentioned pushing for the inclusion of a penal clause to address refusal to cooperate in times of disaster. My question is, why go to the extent of criminalizing non-cooperation? Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Next set of questions. I hope you recall that.
I am Neil Macho, I'm a graduate student from the Department of Political Science. My question has something to do with do-gooders during disaster, the supply of water and food. Because chances are, in the case of Marikina, Palok, and Balaniga, how did the LGU deal with do-gooders? In the sense that if there is an excessive supply of food and water, the other side or the other victims or the beneficiaries might not be able to have it. This is when I conducted my paper, conducted a study in Pablo in Compostela Valley. And when the media came in, like Gigi Manicat and Jessica So, for example, their presence would signal the coming of do-gooders. And in most cases, LGUs who can turn traffic. So there were cases na binabato yung mga food convoys ng mga humanitarian groups. It is because they concentrate on one town and they deprive the other towns of the supply of food and water. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Two questions po para kay Dr. Mauricio. First, dun po sa insertion improvisations, may nakita po kayo or lumabas na aspects on local indigenous knowledge systems. I mean, the local responses of communities sometimes decide, aside from the perspectives of the local chief executives. And second, I'm just thinking, kung meron mga Pilipino na large, kung meron lagi tayong platora ng mga, what we call improvisation.
Pag-repeat daw po yun, na distractions. After the local
indigenous. So, lumitaw din po yung local responses na natin sa research. Then second, kung meron kung nakita po sa parang platora ng mga improvisations na nangyari sa Tacloban at sa Paloy, sa Balangiga. So, tingin po ba, do these make us more practical or more vulnerable in a way? Is this a failure to craft efficient policies or just very cultural?
Which policies?
DR policies.
Following through dun sa mga questions din nila, may comments kanina. Were there policies geared towards social economic resiliency after the postulant in those three areas? Kasi I was in Balangiga, Goborlos, yung buong straight is at G1. And also those yung 40 meters and the bank houses. We suggested na baka pwede gawing production area na lang yan instead of habitat or resettlement. They don't have any land banking, they don't have any land, yung land use lang nila, labo-labo. And then they don't even have any notion of work for sustainable livelihood. It just work for food. So yung ginagawa nila, maglilinis sa kabilang kali, tatabihin dumi dun sa kabilang kali, babalikan nila bukas, at tabi na naman ulit nila. Meron bang ganun ginawang plans or policy or what? Kasi it seems tinalo lang yung ganung pattern sa iba't ibang LGUs in terms of postulant socio-economic response. Wala akong nakitang governance aspect doon. Thank you po.
Regarding the evacuation center, we have evacuation center management system. We have identified for evacuation center in Marikina, Sanangka Elementary School, S. Bautista Elementary School, Concepcion Integrated School, Palanda Elementary School. So these are the established evacuation center. The manager in this evacuation center are the principal, supposed to be owner of this school. So we have set rules on policy regarding management of this evacuation center. So each evacuation center must have a gender-sensitive places for elderly, for lactating women, for pregnant women. So they are situated comfortably on the first floor. So first come first, yung taga Malanday, they occupy Malanday Elementary School. Tumana, they occupy S. Bautista and Concepcion Integrated School. If that's not enough, they could push through Concepcion High School or Concepcion Elementary School. Everybody's welcome there. Walang class segregation naman. Karamihan ang pumunta naman sa evacuation center are those people living in the platform area, not the middle class people. So most of them, they have actually permanent position there. They know their usual places. Now we're implementing the decentralized food distribution. So the barangay chairman was helping cooking the food instead of cooking the food for the whole Marikina system. With regards to the relief goods, so that's a problem also, no? So a lot of people are EPAL, they want to distribute the relief goods on their own. So we have a policy there that all people that want to do these things must first coordinate with our center, the command center, so that we could point to them what places must have needs these relief goods. So we manage that. We ask the evacuation center to report to us all these things, so we will give the instruction where to go. So the work for food is only limited to the Tucci Foundation that is doing this only for a certain period of time. So much better for permanent housing. A good experience. Siguro we have to copy the Gawad Kalinga system where they make new communities more comfortable place. So the recipient themselves are the one working building up this community.
Okay. If I may, can we just divide the remaining questions into 3 areas? The first is on the practice, maybe comparing Marikina and the 2 cases in Leyte. The other set of questions that seem to be hovering are on the policy issues. And the third one is on, I think, on the research itself. Okay, so on the policy aspect, we asked Dr. Versa first. So are the policies more practical, have the practical use to the communities, or do they make the communities more vulnerable? And can we penalize, in fact, criminalize some behaviors? And also, does it apply to both affluent, is it applicable to both affluent and communities does not? Maybe just your thoughts.
Yeah. For one, I want to speak as a practitioner, especially with respect to the issue about the forced evacuation of the middle class sector. But for one, the penalization, what is the, as I said earlier about accountability, it might not be, to some extent, maybe it will be just detrimental to, with all due respect to the Marikina. It might be detrimental to encouraging the participation of other sectors. In fact, because in many cases, if we have noticed, in times of disasters, there's actually there's this so-called therapeutic community that actually emerges, and it involves the participation of many actors, and it's positive, it's spontaneous, so it's a counter idea to the notion of looting. So I don't know if penalizing might be the right way, because in fact it's all just really a matter of, this goes back to the idea of preparing, planning before a disaster takes place. You know, like for example, in the case, as I mentioned earlier, the case of Paro, the arrangement that they came up with the private sector when it comes to the utilization, let's say gasoline, rice, and so on, they would not have come to the point of actually almost like begging, you know, for assistance. If beforehand we have already identified the role of the private sector in the event of a disaster, it's just a matter of like a push button, you know, mechanism. There's an pre-existing arrangement as identified in the contingency plan, then that kind of problem should be avoided. And also the banks, and also the banks and those kind of things, you know, you can easily identify based on some scenario planning. Yes, I think so. It will discourage, I think, the do-gooders when it comes to the meat. That's the, you know, I don't know if, because it's true, it can create also a lot of problems. Like, in fact, because there's in the absence of certain protocols, it can be like what we have seen in the case of Bohol. And we have, for instance, the case of the Philippine Red Cross, and they're not really, you cannot really say that they are just do-gooders because it's their job. But even in their case, we have seen how this conflict in in the distribution of goods could actually be a big problem. And in terms of the socio-economic resiliency, I agree that it's really very important. But one of the weaknesses, at least that we have in the current system, is our tendency to focus on the livelihoods. In fact, if you would look at the programs provided by many of the international NGOs, donors and everything, even the UN, yeah, it's good to provide livelihoods, but what is missing, it's being done sometimes at the expense of, the entrepreneurship. We're not encouraging enough, because if you look at Tacloban for now, they would say, okay, Tacloban has recovered to some extent. But pero kung titingnan nyo yung the business permits, the renewal of business permits, what I've heard is that it's still less than 50%, hovering around 30%. So it only shows, hindi pa nakakabawi yung mga maliliit na mga negosyante. And it's important for resiliency, especially at the community level. So yun lang yung masasabi ko when it comes to that process.
Okay, so Dr. Mender.
I don't know what to add to this discussion. I think it struck me like a question on whether policies make communities more vulnerable. Of course, they can. Depends how the policy has been established, right? I mean, it's not easy to make policy. I mean, it's part of the supposed to do with governance and policy, so I'm not probably the best person to talk about it, but from my experience, there is good policy and there's bad policy. So it depends. Some of it is likely, maybe it would make a community more. Some others may not. I want to add also to the discussion, if I may, on this notion of how to involve the community. We made community-based approaches almost like a religion. And it's very difficult for anybody to stand up and say, well, community-based approaches may not be the most effective. And I am for participatory processes. What I mean by participatory processes, I wouldn't say that it should be bottom-up or it should be top-down. It should be participatory. That's it. The stakeholders, the relevant stakeholders have to be there, and they have to build a consensus. And it's the role of those who have the knowledge to be brokers, to provide data, information, science, knowledge, so that consensus is sustainable, is fair, and it's practical, it's implementable. When we work with cities and LGUs to build their disaster master plans, it's not our plan, it's their plan. And we make sure that all the concerned stakeholders are around to build that plan and to understand how to reach compromises. So when the plan is finished, they sign off on it. And it's their plan, it's not our plan. Participatory processes are scientific processes. There's a science behind it in terms of how to organize stakeholders, how to structure them, how to make sure that they can communicate, how to make sure that they actually work constructively in order to come up with a positive outcome that represents a consensus, that has trade-offs, and they understand the trade-offs. So I'm never an advocate of bottom-up or top-down. I think both fail. I've seen so much community-based approaches that are, in honesty, very good, and some other ones are useless. And they're not sustainable on the long term. They can create more problems for the community in the long term than what was intended for. So, I'm a big believer in participatory processes. Anything I do is a participatory process. But I'm not a big believer in community-based approaches. I think there was time for humanitarian purposes. We have to do that. I'm not saying it doesn't have a role. It does. I'm saying some of them are absolutely necessary. But when it comes to solving large problems, such as disaster risk management or risk and based problems that community face or the nation faces, I think there are approaches that are effective and there are approaches that are less effective. It gets me to one more point and I'll stop. I want to talk about the disaster cycle. Okay. We use the disaster cycle for the last 40 years. Such a cycle was invented to essentially simplify things for the first responders. For the first responders, when we start building emergency managers in the US, that's where we had to, the scientists had to kind of rationalize this for the first responders. Tell them, okay, you have an event, and then this, and then this, and then this. Well, disasters are not a cycle. Usually if we talk about notion of mainstreaming, for example, well, if you start breaking down, like this whole concept of risk-based management into the cycle, it just doesn't work. You cannot mainstream anymore. So I think it's a concept that is completely obsolete now. And we have to think about looking through sectors. Society works, government works, LGUs work along sectors, services that they provide. Business is about services. Business is about ability to provide services that the citizens need very fast and making the services, resilient. So we have to think about which sector are we addressing, whether transport or health or education or any of the sectors, agriculture, water supply. How many people think about, for example, let's say we have a big earthquake, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Metro Manila. About water supply. How can we when we talk accountability, for example, we have 2 water companies that supply water. Does anybody ask a question whether water will be supplied and available a week after, or 3 days after, or a month after? For a community of 10 or 12 million people, or now getting into 15 million people if we include everything that is around? Who's asking these questions? So if we talk disaster cycle, we will not be able to ask this question. If we talk sectoral approaches, then we may start looking at this more in terms of what is the accountability of this sector versus sector, what is the accountability of the service providers, what is the accountability of the health service system in terms of being able to, survive and go by. 80% of the health centers after a whole earthquake sustain some damage, including the main hospital. So I think, conceptually we also have to look at how we state the problem and how we're going to find solutions to that problem. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry we don't have time anymore. If I may just quickly summarize. I think the implications are on about 4 areas. The first is on policy, the need of course to refine or revise local as well as the national policy. I think this has implication to relevance of the sunset review of the DRRM Act. And also at the same time in the policy dimension is also the call for public administration services looking before, during, and after. The second part and more important part, I think, the dimension is because we are in the academe. I think it has been emphasized time and again, and even the presentation of the research. The importance of science, looking at science in looking for solutions. Also the brokerage of information, and especially right now, what is being mentioned is the formulation of a framework, maybe both the development framework and also a research framework, and finding solutions to DRRM. We have a responsibility there. The third dimension in terms of the practices, I think we will have to identify between the national and the local, and also look at collaboration processes, not anymore emphasizing the top-down and bottom-up approaches, but exploring collaboration in the parlance of governance. We call it collaborative governance. It's not really, it's more than the participatory governance, but it's really collaborative in the sense that we negotiate. Different interests we have to negotiate.
and find common solutions. And the fourth is on research methodologies. We were presented with a case and how information was gathered. I think we will have to do more of this, maybe refine our approaches, but link it with policy and also maybe not so emphasized, but I think there were voices about principles like equity and so on, and what the implications will be. Above all, I think UP and the other academic institutions will have to find their place in the RRM.